So I'm going to show my age, but do you remember the old public information films from the 1970s and 80s? The ones with the cartoon? The little boy Charlie and the cat? Or was the cat called Charlie? I don't remember. They had lots of messages. Don't go with matches, don't go with strangers. And we used to have to watch loads of these at school. I don't know about you. And I used to get really frightened. There was ones about pylons, there were ones about fireworks, like really terrifying information films. They were really like trying to get you to be so afraid you wouldn't do anything wrong. And before the pandemic, all those sorts of films seemed like a sort of kind of quaint thing from history. But obviously since the pandemic, we've had all sorts of information, public information films, lots of information messages. And we don't just get them from about health, do we? We get them from adverts all the time. Buy this, buy that. Have you done this? Go on holiday, that's the current one, isn't it? So last year, if you remember, we had lots of messages. What was it? Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. Then we had hands, face, space. I think Boris a few weeks ago, he kept saying, get boosted. That seems to be the latest one, get boosted. So we're all really knowledgeable now about all this different information and how to keep ourselves safe, wearing masks, social distancing, and then the latest number 10 briefing about different numbers of coronavirus. So we're used to having all sorts of information, we're used to having all sorts of messages. So what's the message today? This Christmas Day, what's the real message that we need to hear? Well, a key character in the Bible stories of Christmas is the angel. Right at the beginning of the story, the angel Gabriel comes to Mary, gives her a message. You're going to bear the Son of God. But the first thing the angel says is, do not be afraid. And in the reading we just heard from Luke's Gospel, when the angels suddenly surprise the shepherds in the middle of the dark in the night, the first words the angel speaks, do not be afraid. Lots of messengers are sent by God. You can read them all the way through the Bible, right from the beginning, right to the end. And often, almost always, their first message is, do not be afraid. So I think this is the message that God longs to give us again and again, and particularly perhaps this morning. And we need to hear it, don't we? And if you think about the story, there's lots of fear in the story of the first Christmas. Mary and Joseph must have been terrified, told to travel far from home when Mary was just about to give birth. They get there, they can't find anywhere. Mary has to give birth in a stable. The shepherds, as I said, they'd have been terrified, just minding their own business, looking after the sheep in the dark, as they would normally do, as they were used to. Suddenly, lights everywhere, something in the sky, they're not sure what it is. They're being invited from the darkness, suddenly into the middle of this amazing story. It must have been terrifying. And today we are surrounded by fear too. We hear lots of terrifying things on the news. Omicron virus as well, that's a horrible thing to have to hear about. But there's things like, massing troops in the border of Ukraine, things like climate change. We hear all the time about terrible things that happen with the weather. All sorts of things are happening. We could spend most of our time feeling afraid. And it would be strange if we weren't a bit afraid, because it's part of being human. But into all of this fear, the fear in the story that we've just heard, into our own fear today, God speaks a message of hope. Do not be afraid. God speaks this into the helplessness we feel when we can't change things, the realisation of our physical frailty, our fear of isolation, our separation from our loved ones, as well as our grief perhaps at those who are missing from our tables this Christmas. But even in and through all of this, in the darkness, God's messengers sing, do not be afraid. So this Christmas, I wish you comfort and joy, peace and hope. But I want to encourage you in the rest of this day, and in the few days ahead, with all the clamour of information, all the people, all the busyness, just to take some time to hear that message again. There'll be all sorts of noise, all sorts of things going on. But I just invite you to tune your ears, take some time, and listen to the message of the angels. Listen for their voices underneath all the everyday noises in our world. Do not be afraid, for love, God's love, shown to us in a tiny infant form, this love is with us, and this love will cast out all fear.